This story is about my older sister Dove. She's 29 now, and for as long as I can remember she's despised me. In her eyes, I was living a life I didn't deserve. These days she's divorced, unemployed, and staying with my parents. Back in college, she dropped out for the sake of her wealthy boyfriend, but that didn't last long. He eventually divorced her once he saw her real side. Our relationship as kids was never good. She was the pretty and smart one, always praised and spoiled, while I was left feeling like I could never measure up. People constantly complimented her looks, and she fed off the attention, using it as a weapon against me. She'd say cruel things like nobody liked me, and those jabs stuck. They chipped away at my confidence for years. My parents didn't help either. Whenever there was a conflict, they always took her side. Since she was the golden child who lived up to their expectations, I ended up pulling away from them pretty young. When we were kids, Dove often had her friends over whenever mom and dad were at work. They'd wander into my room, mess with my stuff, and once even ruined a school project so badly I almost failed. I wanted to tell my mom about it, but Dove threatened to share embarrassing pictures of me with my classmates. At 14, that was enough to terrify me. She never owned up to anything she did, and honestly, even if I had told my parents, it wouldn't have mattered. They never cared about my side anyway. Over time, she pulled enough stunts like that to make me truly resent her. Mom never defended me, though sometimes dad would step in. I remember once Dove stole my phone, sent weird pictures of me to my girl group, and then cried her way out of it when I complained. Another time, she spilled coffee all over my prom dress, pretended it was an accident, and managed to make herself look like the victim. After that, I gave up even going to dad for help. To this day, I can't understand why she carried so much hatred toward me. Later on, I realized it wasn't really about me at all. She has all the traits of a narcissist. When it came to relationships, she was a walking red flag. She cheated on every guy she dated, and it's hard for me to admit, but yeah, she was a gold digger. The fact that one of her exes is still friends with me says everything. As a teen she was manipulative and cruel, and adulthood didn't change her, it only got worse. My parents let her run wild, never once holding her accountable, so she grew into someone toxic. Once school was behind me, things slowly got better. I worked my tail off to get into my dream college, pushed through a couple rough years, and eventually landed a job I'd always wanted. That's where I met Atlas, the love of my life, during an office conference. He was smart, kind, and good-looking. We clicked instantly, and a few months later we were dating. We went on trips together, traveled, hiked. It all helped strengthen our bond. Atlas was really close with his family, so not long after we started dating, he introduced me to his siblings and parents. It took me much longer to introduce him to my family. The only reason for the delay was Dove. I had this constant knot in my stomach, convinced she'd try to ruin things for me like she always had. Growing up, she was used to having the best of everything, and now, with my life going better than hers, I knew she wouldn't be able to handle it. Especially when it came to my relationship. Atlas eventually started questioning why I was dragging my feet, so after about a year and a half together, I finally told my dad about him. Dad was thrilled that I'd found someone good for me and even invited us over for dinner. I was happy but nervous, because I knew Dove was capable of anything when it came to sabotaging me. Atlas already knew a little about my family dynamic, but before dinner I told him more about Dove. He just shrugged and said he could handle it. A few days after I told my dad, Dove called me out of nowhere. That alone was shocking, since she'd never bothered to call before. She wanted to know all about Atlas and when I'd be bringing him home. It was obvious she was fishing for details. I figured Mom must have told her I was in a serious relationship, and suddenly Dove was pretending to be all warm and sisterly. I wasn't fooled. I knew exactly why she was interested. Now I'm stuck debating if I should take the risk of letting her meet Atlas, or if I should invite my parents over to my place instead to keep things controlled. Update: some of you wanted to know more about Dove, so here's the background. It's true that my parents, especially Dad, started to change their opinion of her after her divorce. She really did wreck her own future. She was bright academically, but once she got into college her only focus was her looks. That's when she met Jeremy, a wealthy guy, and ditched school to be with him. Back then, I was still in high school, busting my ass for my college entrance exams. Dove would mock me, saying I'd never make it into my dream school. But I did. For the first time ever, my parents actually praised me. They even threw a little party to celebrate. That was enough to spark Dove's jealousy, and in the middle of my celebration, she announced her engagement to Jeremy. The funniest part? From the look on Jeremy's face, it was clear he had no idea she was going to do that. But she succeeded. Suddenly everyone's attention shifted to her. She used to flaunt the expensive gifts Jeremy bought her and sneer that I'd never land a rich man because I was ugly and unlovable. It stung, but I told her straight up that I wasn't a gold digger like her. I could make my own money, and she could chase rich husbands all she wanted. To me, she was selfish, cruel, and downright evil. A week after her announcement, Dove and Jeremy got officially engaged. By then I was already at college and chose not to attend. From that point on, I barely spoke to her. Coming home during holidays felt great because Dove was usually away traveling with Jeremy. After about a year of dating, they had a huge, fancy wedding. Most of it was bankrolled by Jeremy, though Dad chipped in to save face since Dove didn't earn a penny. Their marriage barely lasted 3 years. From what I heard, the main issue was kids. Jeremy wanted to be a dad, and Dove refused to even discuss it. He told me once that he never pressured her, but he hated that she hid her feelings about children for so long and strung him along. That was the final straw. Jeremy later confided in me about what really broke their marriage apart. He said Dove's constant drinking, late-night partying, and flirting with random guys at bars destroyed any emotional connection they had. According to him, she only married him for money and never cared about him as a person. Honestly, I wondered how he didn't see it sooner. He even showed me videos where Dove was out with other men, letting them touch her in ways no married woman should, and she never once tried to stop them. In a way, I was relieved for him, better to get out than stay trapped with her. Of course, my parents sided with Dove and painted Jeremy as the villain, saying he pressured her into having kids. They never once admitted their precious daughter was at fault. After the divorce, she had nowhere to go, so she crawled back home. With no degree and zero work experience, her only option was living off my parents. She played the part of the broken, traumatized woman, but anyone with eyes could see she wasn't heartbroken. She was thrilled to be free. Within weeks she was back to clubbing, hooking up with random men, and living off cheap thrills. Her Instagram stories told the whole story: weekly dates, drinking, drama, and chaos. Meanwhile, I kept building my career. 2 years in, I landed my dream job with an incredible salary, and my parents were over the moon for me. I went home to share the news, and Dad was practically glowing with pride. But then Dove staggered in, half drunk, ruining the moment. Dad snapped and told her she should have focused on school instead of wasting her life with Jeremy. He even compared us, pointing out how I was financially independent while she was still mooching off them. Mom rushed to defend her, telling Dad not to make such comments, but Dove lost her temper, slammed the door, and stormed off. That was the breaking point for Dad. He told Mom flat out that Dove was spoiled rotten and needed to take charge of her life instead of leeching off them. Later that night, Dove slithered into my room. She sneered that no matter how much money I made, I'd never be like her. She pointed at my stomach and cheeks, body-shaming me as if we were still teenagers. Back then, those words would have cut me to pieces. But now? I just laughed in her face and told her I had no interest in being anything like her. She completely lost it. Furious, she demanded I leave the house. I reminded her it was our parents' home, not hers, and she had no right to kick me out. The next day, while packing to head back, I found 2 of my dresses slashed with scissors. I showed my parents, and Dad was furious. He confronted Dove, while Mom made excuses, saying Dove was still in shock and didn't know what she was doing. Dad wasn't having it this time. He told Mom to stop covering for her and told Dove directly that he was done supporting her narcissistic behavior. He warned her to get her act together because he wouldn't keep enabling her. Naturally, Dove directed all her rage at me, convinced I was the reason Dad turned on her. I tried to stay unbothered, but things crossed the line when she started making advances on my boyfriend, Atlas. After a lot of thought and long talks with him, I decided it was time to bring him home anyway. There was no point hiding him. If Dove wanted to try her usual games, this would be the test. My friends even said it was better to know now if Atlas could handle it than find out later. So, with heavy dread, I showed up at my parents' house with Atlas. And just as I feared, Dove immediately started throwing herself at him. The moment he greeted my parents, she lunged in for a hug like she hadn't seen him in years, even though it was their first meeting. She'd gone all out, dyed her blonde hair jet black, wore a brand new outfit, nails done, hairstyle to perfection. She looked like she was getting ready for a date, not a family dinner. Throughout dinner, she kept inserting herself into every conversation, trying way too hard to get Atlas's attention. When I asked her to move so I could sit beside him, she glared at me before reluctantly sliding over. She pestered him about his interests, and every time he mentioned something he liked, she'd claim she loved it too, even when I knew she didn't. She kept saying how compatible they were and winked at me as if it was all a harmless joke. Atlas was clearly uncomfortable, so he ignored her and redirected his attention to my parents. After dinner, I went to shower, leaving Atlas alone for a few minutes. That's when Dove pulled her next move. She told him she lost her phone and asked him to call her number, just so she could get his contact. He played along but later told me he thought it was pathetic. She also tried pulling the sympathy card, telling him her divorce left her mentally shattered and took years to recover. Mom even joined in, bashing Jeremy, as if the two of them could bond over painting her ex as the bad guy. At one point, Atlas asked if I'd like to walk around the neighborhood with him. Before I could answer, Dove jumped up and said she'd love to come too. Atlas shot her a look and told her plainly that he wanted alone time with me. Her face turned beet red, and she retreated to her room. It's only been a few days since that visit, but I can already feel it. Dove isn't done. She's plotting, and I'm bracing myself for whatever desperate stunt she's going to pull next to try and lure Atlas into her bed. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared of what Dove might try, but at the same time, I trust Atlas and wanted to see for myself how he handled her advances. Update 2, big news, I'm engaged. Atlas proposed to me last month while we were on a trip. He actually got down on one knee with the ring, and I swear I couldn't stop smiling. It felt like everything I'd been dreaming of. But of course, Dove couldn't resist trying to ruin things even after that visit to my parents' place. Not long after, she started texting Atlas, pretending to check in on how he was doing. Atlas loves cats, so Dove began flooding his inbox with random cat videos even though she's never cared for animals in her life. When she realized how much he adored cats, she actually went and got one just so she could record herself with it and send him the clips. At first, Atlas would show me her texts and her fake sweet "hope you're doing well" messages. She was laying it on thick, acting all nurturing and caring. Eventually though, he stopped showing me her messages, and I thought maybe she'd finally lost interest. We moved on with our lives, focusing on our jobs and wedding plans, and I didn't bring her up anymore. Then one night, I was scrolling through social media and saw that Dove had added Atlas. She wasn't just liking his new posts, she was digging back years into his old photos and videos, leaving heart emojis everywhere like some obsessed teenager. My stomach sank. Out of curiosity, I checked his phone and saw her messages were still coming in. Most were unread, but the desperation was obvious. To make it worse, I found missed calls from her, including one at 3 in the morning. My chest tightened when I saw that, and I confronted Atlas about why he hadn't told me. He looked nervous but said he'd been ignoring her, thinking it was best not to bring her up so we could just move on. I pressed him about the late-night calls, and he finally explained. One night Dove called him sounding distressed, and he panicked, thinking something serious had happened. Instead, she started unloading about her divorce, playing the victim, and acting like she needed someone to talk to. He told her she should be leaning on her parents or me, not calling another woman's fiancé in the middle of the night. Hearing that, I was torn. I told him that keeping this from me was damaging my trust. He assured me that he'd never fall for her games, but I'd read enough stories about men caving to manipulation to know I couldn't just ignore it. I told him point blank that the next time Dove called, he needed to hand the phone to me. Not long after, the chance came. Atlas woke me up in the middle of the night when Dove's name popped up on his screen. I answered, and the second she heard my voice, she froze. After a moment of silence, she mumbled something about calling by mistake and hung up. The next day, I tried calling her over and over to confront her, but she ignored me. So I texted her from Atlas's phone, telling her directly, if she had something urgent to say, she could call me, but she was never to call or text him again. After that, the messages stopped. For the first time in months, I felt like we could finally breathe. When Atlas proposed, I shared a picture of the ring with my dad. I'm sure he showed it to Mom, and of course Dove saw it too. That's when she started up again, sending Atlas stupid videos and pointless texts like she couldn't stand being ignored. This time, I'd had enough. As soon as Atlas told me, I picked up the phone and called her myself. I let out every bit of anger I'd been bottling up, telling her to stop playing her sick games and get a life. She barely spoke, just sat in silence while I unloaded. But I underestimated her because instead of backing off, she ran crying to Mom. Within minutes, Mom called me, screaming. She said I was cruel, that I'd given Dove panic attacks, and accused me of tormenting my poor sister who was still recovering from her traumatic divorce. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dove had never once been depressed about her divorce, she celebrated it. I hung up on Mom and called Dad, telling him straight out that if they kept turning a blind eye to Dove's behavior, I'd cut contact for good. I wasn't going to let myself be her puppet anymore. Update 3, I never imagined Dove could sink this low. She'd spent years body shaming me, belittling me, making my life miserable, but trying to seduce my fiancé? That crossed a line I never thought she'd dare to cross. It was a hard pill to swallow that my own sister was actively trying to break my wedding. We just started planning the big day when Mom reached out again. I wasn't speaking to her after the last blow-up, but she called to apologize. She claimed she'd only yelled at me because she panicked seeing Dove's so-called panic attacks. I didn't even respond. Later, one of my cousins told me that Dove had been going around telling everyone she was heartbroken over my success. She'd been crying to relatives, saying I was accusing her of stealing my fiancé and that I didn't deserve the life I had. In her mind, she was the beautiful one, and therefore she should have had the dream job, the man, and the happiness, not me. I told Mom about this, and all she could say was, "Forget everything and just focus on your wedding." As if ignoring Dove would magically make her disappear. Everything seemed to be falling into place, and for once Dove was keeping a low profile. She hadn't popped up in our lives in the days leading up to the wedding, which gave me a little peace. On the big day, while I was busy getting ready, I got a sudden call from Atlas's best friend. He told me to come to Atlas's room immediately and to bring my parents with me. I laughed nervously and teased him that Atlas wasn't supposed to see the bride before the ceremony, but he cut me off and said it was serious. My heart dropped. We rushed to his room, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Atlas was shirtless, barely conscious, slipping in and out of awareness. His groomsmen quickly explained what had happened. While Atlas was getting ready, Dove had shown up with a drink. Atlas refused, but she pressured him until he finally gave in and took a sip. Almost instantly, he realized something was off. It was spiked. He excused himself to the bathroom and managed to call his best friend, telling him everything and asking him to come quickly. By the time his friend got there, Atlas was staggering out of the bathroom, already half passed out. Luckily, his friend had a key card to the room since they were sharing it. He rushed in with his camera recording and found Dove straddling Atlas, undressing herself, and rubbing against him while he tried to push her off, shouting at her to leave. The entire disgusting scene was caught on video. When she noticed the camera, Dove quickly tried to cover herself and acted like they'd just been making out. Before leaving, she even smirked at his friend and told him not to tell anyone, completely oblivious that she'd just been filmed. When we arrived, Atlas was still lying there, pale and dizzy. Just a couple of sips of that drink had hit him hard, leaving him with a splitting headache and nausea. The glass was still sitting on the table, with strange particles settled at the bottom. My parents were horrified and embarrassed. They couldn't believe their daughter was capable of something so vile. Mom called Dove in, and when she walked in, her lipstick was smudged, her hair messy. "Without shame," she said, "I know you're all mad, but it was mutual. Atlas loves me, and he's been hitting on me ever since we met. Today, he begged me for one last hookup before the wedding." That was it. Mom slapped her across the face. She told Dove straight to her face that her lies weren't going to work, because the entire act had been caught on camera. Dove froze when she realized it. My parents kicked her out of the venue right then and there, and security was told not to let her back in. She had wanted to stage a scene, to make it look like Atlas had cheated so I'd call off the wedding, but her plan collapsed. Dad called a doctor immediately, who confirmed Atlas had been given a spiked drink. Atlas's family was furious. His parents and siblings were ready to hunt Dove down, and my parents had to step in, apologizing profusely just to calm them. The ceremony had to be delayed while Atlas recovered. He threw up several times before finally stabilizing. Word spread fast, and soon our guests were buzzing with gossip about the chaos before the wedding. When Atlas finally regained enough strength, Dad walked me down the aisle. I was overjoyed to marry the man I loved, but a part of me was still reeling from what had almost destroyed the day. During his vows, Atlas added something extra. He promised to protect our marriage from anyone who tried to come between us. Those words hit me deep, because we both knew exactly who he was talking about. After our honeymoon, my parents came to visit. They apologized to Atlas directly for everything Dove had done and for all the years they'd looked the other way. Dad told us he'd kicked her out of the house and that she was on her own now. For once, I think he meant it. Even now, I can't shake it from my head. My wedding was 1 inch away from being ruined forever. If Atlas's friend hadn't recorded that moment, I don't know if I'd ever have been able to fully believe he wasn't involved. That thought alone still makes me shiver.